All right, guys, I hope you're ready for this one. My name's Andrew Pecoraro from Peck's Metal Picks, and today I'm going to be talking about the death of Every Time I Die. Basically, my goal here is to outline the events that has led to the band calling it quits. We're going to look at the band's tweets and some legal documents, and I'm going to lay it out as objectively as I can so that we can get all of the facts. First things first, at the outset, you should know Every Time I Die basically broke up because their vocalist, Keith Buckley, and their guitarist, Jordan Buckley, have been having some major problems. All right, that's pretty much the source of all of this drama. It's important to note that they are brothers and that they both formed Every Time I Die back in 1998. Now, I'm a pretty big fan of the band. I wouldn't say I'm like a super hardcore, die-hard fan. Um, but these guys are pretty awesome. And this album that they released last year called Radical, one of my favorites that they've ever done. And their entire discography is filled with classics. This has really been a staple metalcore band in the genre. And they've put on some of the best live performances that I've ever seen. All of that to say, it is incredibly sad that this is how they're going out. You know, it's just not what you would have expected for a band like this, and it's really sad. So without further ado, let's just go ahead and jump into the tweets here. This is the one that started it off. It was from Keith Buckley. He posted it on December 3rd at 3:38 a.m. saying, "Caring for my own mental health has taken priority over everything else in my life. The love it has brought to everything I do has been clear to everyone that has seen me, and I value my progress way too much to allow a setback. I'm taking a hiatus from ETID to prepare for TTS." TTS is like the Christmas holiday show that the band does. It's sort of a play on words. It stands for Tid the Season, kind of like Tis the Season, but because the band's name is ETID, you get what I'm saying. Great. Next, the band tweeted a response in the morning. Unfortunately, I can't show it to you because they deleted their Twitter and Instagram accounts, so I just can't show it to you. I did see it when it was posted and before it was taken down. I didn't think it was that bad, but this is Keith's response to that post. He says, "Now that I've seen the official statement indicating that ETID is finishing the tour without their singer, I think I'm ready to tell you all a little bit about exactly why my mental health has had to become a priority over ETID." Goes on to say that while meditating in a side room yesterday, I overheard my own brother tell an outsider that ETID had been in talks to replace me this entire time. I thought they were my biggest supporters, but Jordan, his brother, had lied. His concern was a cruel trick. Their statement is proof. Like I said, I saw the statement. I didn't really think that there was anything too offensive about it. It just seemed like a pretty generic statement from the band. But apparently Keith was pretty offended by it. He continues saying, "Traveling separately, away from alcohol and the behavior of those who choose to drink because he was focusing on his sobriety, has brought me peace of mind and has made me the best performer I've ever been. I love the ETID community." Awesome. Continues saying, "Being ostracized from a band I've built for 20 years because I made a decision to do whatever it took to be a good human being hurts me deeply. But trust me when I say I'm the most mentally fit I have ever been. This decision was made to protect myself from my own sibling." Now, the one thing I want to note here is the first time I read this, I didn't really read into it too much, didn't think too much about it. But based on a couple of Keith's other responses, I kind of look at this now and I wonder why he really felt the need to say, "Trust me when I say I'm the most mentally fit I've ever been." Like, not to get political here, but it kind of reminds me of like when Trump was in office and he said, "Trust me, I have the highest IQ ever," or "Trust me, my doctor says I'm the most healthy president that there's ever been." It's kind of like just the fact that they feel the need to say that raises a red flag for me, and it just immediately causes me to doubt that a little bit. So anyway, we'll move past that, but just keep that in mind. So here we have a letter from a law firm that the other band members basically hired, and they sent this letter to Keith. And so I'll go ahead and pull up a better view of it here. We're really not going to spend too much time on it. The one thing that I want to note is that Keith reads this letter and immediately thinks that he is fired from Every Time I Die, and that the 4 band members who hired this law firm have kicked him out, and that he is separated from the band. We'll see the other band members' responses to that in a moment, but I'm just going to be honest here. I read this letter. I don't really know what the purpose of it is. I kind of agree with Keith that it does seem to draw some lines in the sand and set some boundaries and kind of like working with some definitions of who is and isn't in the band. But the other part of it is basically just a cease and desist. And so we don't have to spend too much time looking at that. Next, though, we have this huge tweet from Keith, and I'm kind of laying this out from his perspective first, and then we'll hear from the other band members. We're not going to spend that much time on this because it is just outrageously long. So I took some notes here just so I can catch all the highlights for you so you don't have to read it yourself. But basically, on this first page, Keith mentions that he was trying to talk to the band after December 3rd when he posted that first very initial tweet, but he didn't get a response until the letter from the law firm on December 20th, even though the band's manager quit on December 17th. I guess they just didn't talk. He clarifies that he was offended by the band's statement that they would continue the tour without him by having fans sing the song like it's karaoke. Okay, we'll go on to the second page here. He states his understanding that the letter from the lawyer meant that he was separated from Every Time I Die, and that he actually did comply with all of the cease and desist requirements. He goes on to say that the members of Every Time I Die reached out to him on January 5th with the offer to give him the band back and let him continue without them. And here, this is actually really important. I want to note that Keith says he didn't want to do that, and he doesn't see Every Time I Die as anything other than these specific members. So the 5 members who are in it right now, he wanted it to be them or nothing. Or so he says here. But in the meantime, he was uncomfortable that tickets for their upcoming tour were still being sold, and he sent the other members a letter that contained a statement that he said he would release if the band didn't post something in the next 24 hours, which, giving the band an ultimatum is not the most cooperative move, but later that night, the band posted that they were officially disbanding. We'll look at that post in a minute here. So on to the third page of this mega long post, Keith says he's obviously upset that that's how he found out the band ended from that tweet that we're going to look at. But the interesting thing I want to note here is if you look at the second paragraph and look at how he capitalized truth and love, it's kind of like astrology / tarot cards. And maybe that's how he always talks. I really don't know. But the line about miraculous growth and just quite a few other things in there I thought were a little bit strange. And that made me look back at that earlier tweet where he's talking about being the most mentally fit ever. And I don't know, like I said, maybe that really is just how he is and how he talks, but it just seemed a little off to me. Moving on, though, he says that he felt like his mental health was weaponized and used against him. He states that the breakup of the band was actually inevitable and that they should have called it quits in 2014. He references familial dysfunction, basically talking about problems between he and his brother. So clearly, he and Jordan have been having long-standing issues. And I actually think one of the most interesting things in this whole letter is that he hints that the spiritual and political stances that he took on Radical caused their issues to become insurmountable, and that they were basically the breaking point that he thinks caused all of this to happen. The fourth page we're not even going to look at. I'll bring it up here. You could pause it if you want to read it, but it really doesn't say much of anything for the substance. Okay, so we're going to go back here and look at the band members' responses to what Keith said when he received that letter from the law firm. Steve, the band's bassist, says, "Where does that say that you're fired?" Man, this is sad. I couldn't agree more. This is such a bummer. But basically, Steve is saying, the letter doesn't say you're fired, dude. What are you talking about? And then Jordan says, he's talking about that letter from the law firm, says, that was sent to let him know we'd left, and that if he wanted to replace us and continue on like we'd been hearing, we were more okay with it. We just wanted it to be done professionally and legally. It's actually quite smart. I understand people will believe whatever they want. Dude, I don't know about that. Okay, I read the letter. I did not see anywhere in there that said, if you want to replace us, you can have the band and go do whatever you want with it and like get new band members and just continue on. I do not see that in that letter. That just seems pretty insane to me. Maybe that was like some of the intent behind the letter, but the letter does not say that. And the band pretty clearly was not communicating with each other. So I definitely have some doubts about when that letter was sent and then when, because Keith says on like January 5th is when the band told him that he could move forward with the band without them. So that's like a 15, 16-day gap right there. So I don't know. Like I said, I'm not going to spend too much time on that letter because it's not very clear to me. Okay, next we're going to look at these tweets from Steve. Like I mentioned, band's bassist. The thread starts here. Unfortunately, Steve did not create a thread where they're all connected, and so you just have to scroll through them like this kind of. I will let you know he posted it on January 19th if you want to go back and try to read through it yourself. Kind of like what I did with Keith's, I have basically just pulled the highlights here, and so I'm just going to go through them for you so that you don't have to go through his crazy long thread either. So Steve basically says this band of 20 plus years was tore down and ripped away by 4 tweets in December 2021. It basically became a TMZ/soap opera, and it's quite possibly the saddest demise of anything I've ever seen in my life. Definitely agree, man. It's not a good look. He goes on to say that their manager retired in June. I'll kind of scroll here, but it might not match exactly my notes. But he says that their manager retired in June, but they brought on a new manager who was formerly their day-to-day point woman. She was great, but privately and behind their backs, Keith made a call to her saying he wanted Jordan out of the band. What in the world? Okay, that's just, how can you even make sense of that? You're literally getting 2 completely opposite stories here. At first, Keith is saying he heard Jordan say he wanted to kick Keith out, and now Steve is saying that Keith talked to their manager about kicking Jordan out. So I have no idea how you're supposed to make heads or tails of that and choose who you believe, because they're like just blaming each other, which is, I don't know, I guess kind of could be a good move, but one of them is obviously lying. So yeah, that caused a huge rift. The band canceled a live stream event, canceled a video shoot, and paid for therapy for Jordan and Keith. And after 1 session of therapy, Keith convinced the band that he could continue on and keep the band rolling. So the band was going to play a COVID comeback show, but found out from management that Keith was trying to cancel the show even after every single safety precaution was humanly done. So in full transparency, the band got on a call and asked Keith about it. He immediately called the manager a liar, and she started crying, and then he hung up the phone. Interestingly, Steve mentions that the band hasn't really been drinking on tours lately, which kind of goes against Keith thinking that the band was going to have a lot of like bad influences for him. Who knows the truth about that either. But Steve says that Keith was showing up to shows 10 minutes, sometimes 5 minutes before set time because he was traveling in a separate RV. But he reaffirms that the band never considered replacing Keith. So on December 3rd, the band saw Keith's initial tweet about leaving the tour, and that's how they found out. They didn't have any conversations, they just saw the tweet. So honestly, if their initial statement was a little bit off base, it's probably because they were so taken aback and just caught by absolute surprise about the fact that Keith was leaving the tour, even though they had a couple shows left. So Steve notes that, keeping in line with the band's history, when Keith left a tour for whatever reason, they have always continued on, and so they decided to have fans come up and sing their favorite songs. So he's basically saying, I don't even get how Keith could be offended by that. That's what we've always done. But yeah, Keith took that as an insult. And on December 4th, Steve and Andy texted Keith, and Keith said he didn't trust either of them. This is kind of a bizarre conversation, apparently. Keith's main concerns were about Andy's girlfriend unfollowing him on social media and wondering why Steve laughed at something Jordan said in the dressing room, but Steve doesn't even remember that happening. So Keith eventually gave Andy and Steve an ultimatum to choose him or Jordan. Sorry, I've given up scrolling on Twitter. It's just not going to be worth it for me to read this and try to get his tweets to match up, because his tweets are so much longer than my notes here. Okay, but Keith also said Steve and Andy allowed Jordan to physically and emotionally abuse him for 20 years, which Steve wholeheartedly refutes. Steve talks about Steve also specifically talks about Every Time I Die being the current 5 members, which is really interesting because that's actually exactly what Keith was saying too. Every Time I Die is us 5. There can't be any changes. So they actually seemed like their views there are aligned, but obviously it didn't work out, so I'm not sure what happened. But at the ETID the Season show, the band had no access to Keith since he had a separate changing room, and no band members were allowed to drink. Weirdly, during between the week that was between the tour and ETID the Season, Keith accused Jordan of making a fake set list to hand out to him. Steve says that never happened, and Keith was blocking the band from his social media while he was at a Bills game to comment, or he unblocked Steve while he was at a Bills game and commented "noted," like super cryptically, which Steve just thought was weird, and then he texted Keith and Keith didn't reply. So I don't know, that just seems pretty odd. But Steve states very clearly that Keith refused to take the stage with Jordan, which, if true, means Keith was kind of the one not committed to keeping the same roster. But I guess, they're claiming the opposite here, that maybe it was Jordan that wanted to kick Keith out. So Steve also says that Keith posted the letter to make it look like he was fired, when his own lawyer even knows that's not the case. Like I said, jury's still out on that one if you ask me. Steve ends by saying that he's sad how this has all ended up, but he's thankful for everybody's support. So here we have a tweet. This is sent on January 17th, and I can bring up, the individual parts of it here. And this is the first one. This is basically the band's statement when they said that they were going to break up. They were saying that the 4 members, their last show with Every Time I Die was on December 11th. While we hope to come to an agreed upon legal statement that outlined the truth, we were informed today of something planned to be released, not mutually agreed upon, that consists of inaccuracies and controls a narrative to benefit one. I think that this is talking about when Keith gave them the 24-hour ultimatum to make a post, otherwise he would post something. This is what the band came up with. They decided to post this instead of letting Keith do it. So here's part 2. Every Time I Die was these 5 members, and we were never budging or accepting any changes. Simply, there's no truth about the band continuing on with a new singer. And lastly, we wouldn't be where we are today without everybody who has supported them, and they're disappointed, and so on and so on. Okay. So then we will move on to this tweet from Jordan, which is basically, this is the tweet saying that they are officially broken up and Every Time I Die is dead, which is a huge bummer. But the one thing that I do want to show here as we wrap this up is this post from Goose's girlfriend. And I want to note that her account is private. That's why you can see the little lock by her name and by her @ symbol on on Twitter. Take this with a grain of salt, who knows? But this is a screenshot of what she posted, and we're going to look at it here. She says, "Your manager quit because," and this is in response to Keith's really long post. She's saying that their manager quit because Keith would yell at her, calling her a liar, making her cry every time that he got questioned about asking for advances every single week without mentioning it to the other members. So that kind of sounds like there could be some financial component going on, like some kind of financial distress that Keith was under, needing some like advancements each week, monetary advancements. So that's pretty serious. Like I said, I'm just putting the facts out here. Draw your own conclusions. Some of this stuff is a little bit less relevant, but here where it says, "So it's time to play and everyone's ready and just waiting on Keith, who's nowhere to be found," which she says was normal. Someone else who's not in the band made a joke saying, "Oh, I'll just get up there and sing." And then boom, Keith turns the corner and yells, "Fuck you," and everyone, and just gets on stage. So maybe that's where he thought they were talking about replacing him, was like some kind of misunderstanding, or he misheard something and took it serious. I'm not sure what to make of that, but basically she's sad about how the band members are being treated. Says that he never allowed a discussion with the other guys, and even though they tried really hard to talk to him, and that he went to therapy, said he was better after one session. So that does align with what Steve's tweets were saying. But yeah, basically down at the bottom here, this is probably the most serious accusation. Says he is a pathological and abusive liar, brainwashed and manic, and he made his own decisions with zero sensitivity to others. He needs major help and was abusing his platform for years, also verbally and mentally abusing his bandmates behind closed doors, which I can't even say anything about that. Some of that is like verging on like medical diagnosis type stuff, so I'm just going to leave that alone. But clearly some people thought that he was a source of some of the band's problems. Okay, so wrapping up, really sucks. I hope this timeline sort of set the events and you were able to like connect some of the dots. It's tough that they started deleting some of their tweets and the responses and stuff like that. So hopefully this can just be like a historical record of what happened and, like cause of events and laying out the timeline of how everything went down. But yeah, man, just really sad to see Every Time I Die go down like this. And like I said, I'm not like an absolute diehard fan of the band, so I don't know Keith or how he normally acts or any of the band members either. But based on some of these tweets, it kind of seems like he's acting a little bit erratically. Definitely seems like there's some type of paranoia going on, whether there's cause for it or not. I'm not sure. You can try to be the judge of that one, but just some like insecurities definitely. Sounds like there's been long-standing problems between him and his brother, and they just finally came to a head, and everything exploded. And in a way, it is kind of cool that it happened like in live time, right in front of our eyes on Twitter. Like we actually got to watch it unfold instead of just seeing one polished, lifeless statement at the end of the band calling it quits, and everybody wonders what actually happened. It's like we definitely got pretty in-depth accounts from both sides here about what was going on. All I can do is lay it out for you, and you can try to draw your own conclusions. Feel free to put some conspiracy theories in the comments, or whatever your thoughts are on it. But I think we can all agree that it is definitely sad, and I'm going to go listen to Radical. So thanks for watching, guys. I'll see you next time.